Welcome back to Pastor Plex Podcast. I'm your host, Pastor Plex, along with none other than Pastor Holland. How you doing?
Hello. Doing great.
And we have today a very, 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 very special guest, John Hash. And I want you to introduce yourself with, tell us what you're trying to run for and kind of like where you're going with your career right now.
Okay, yeah. Well, first off, thanks for having me here. My name is John Hash, and I'm running for Texas State Representative of District 50.
District 50.
So yeah, first I'm going to break that down. State representatives, what do we do? Who are they? All that stuff. And then
are you going to DC?
Not exactly. Nope. I'm going to the DC of Texas.
Nice.
So that's here. Down the road.
Kind of works out, right?
It works out.
You don't have to move.
I don't have to go very far. A lot of the other state representatives who come from Panhandle or out west, they have to travel in, spend a few days, go back. That's a little bit more strain on family. So fortunately, we're very close. But a state representative, similar to how we view our federal government that has an executive, a legislative, and a judicial branch, we have that here in Texas on the state level. So we have our executive with the governor, lieutenant governor. We have our legislative. We have our own House and our Senate. And we also have, a Texas Supreme Court judicial system. So we are just mimicking on what I would say, slightly smaller scale.
Yeah.
So state representatives, they are elected based upon the district that they live in. I believe we have 150 state representatives broken up across the state of Texas. And when we talk about how do we, just the other day, we had several proposed constitutional amendments.
Yeah.
Those were
to the state.
Right. Yeah. State constitutional amendments. Those were written by representatives and senators here at the state level.
Okay.
So representatives will come in, they will discuss policy. They will then work with lawyers to write a bill. That bill gets put forth into a subcommittee, could be on education, could be on healthcare, could be on veteran affairs. It gets discussed there. It then gets put to a vote. If it makes it out of the subcommittee, it makes it to the state house floor, which has all the members of the House can then discuss that particular bill. From there, it can go several ways. Get kicked back to committee for reevaluation. If it doesn't pass, it can be passed and then sent on to, in this case, we're talking about from House to the Senate. And they have to be able to pass the same bill. So if the Senate looks at it and they make revisions, then that gets passed back to confirmation for the House to make sure that we're all on the same page. So state reps, they represent certain areas. In Austin, we have about a dozen or so districts because dense population, and it all is population-based.
Yeah.
So the District 50 does incorporate where we are sitting today here in the Wells Branch neighborhood.
Yeah.
We're kind of what I would say is the northwest corner of that district.
So where does that district cover? Like, what's all the areas?
Yeah. So here we're the northwest corner. It does cross I-35 to the east, and it covers a portion of southern Pflugerville.
Okay.
The defining line there is Pecan Road, Pecan Drive.
Yeah, like where the West Pecan coffee shop is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you live on the north side of that street, I'm not your representative, or I would, if elected, I would not be your representative.
Right. Yeah.
You live on the southern side of that street, then yeah, you're part of District 50. So
how far west do you go?
That one goes all the way till it hits 130.
How far?
How far west?
East all the way 130.
East all the way to 130. West, it goes to Mopac.
Okay.
We have a little north, kind of up toward 45. It follows Mopac down. It takes like two little hop across Mopac, which I believe those are apartment complexes that it encapsulates. So there's like two apartment complexes that it goes whoop, swings right around them. Then it comes back. It goes along Breaker Boulevard.
Yeah. That's the southern boundary, or
kind of.
Yeah.
That's the south west portion.
South. Okay.
It then goes to Lamar.
Yep.
And then it goes south on Lamar.
Oh, wow.
And then from South Lamar goes to about 290.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's pretty far down there.
Then we're going to stretch around 290 and we're going to make our way back up almost all the way to 130. But since 130,
so you have a big chunk of Austin.
It's a big chunk of Austin, yeah. All within Travis County. It incorporates 3 school districts because part of it up here we're in Round Rock ISD, does have part of Pflugerville ISD and Austin ISD. So there's 3 districts that are part of it. Yeah, so Pflugerville, it does. Again, you're working with the city of Pflugerville, Chamber of Commerce of Pflugerville, and also Austin here. So that is where it is. And again, it's Austin being a denser population versus some that are.
It's a smaller geography, but a greater population, if that makes sense.
They all try to keep the populations roughly similar.
Right.
But again, smaller geography because of the density.
Population, smaller
geography. Yeah.
Okay. So you're running for, it's not like you just got elected on November 4th. You're looking for next November, right? For the midterms, if is what they call them, right?
Yes. Yeah. So correct. That is right. The last one was just amendments or propositions. There were a few if you're in Pflugerville or if you're in other states listening to this podcast. Yeah, you might have had your governor election or things like that. Pflugerville just had their mayor, but what I would be first up is actually going to be primaries. Those are first obstacle when it comes to running.
And the reason why it's the District 50 is open is James Tallarico is I don't know, resigning is the right word. Or he's going to run for. Senate.
Running. Yeah, he's running for Senate. You can't run for two positions at the same time.
That makes sense.
So he made his choice to run for U.S. Senate. So now for a discussion about James, he's taken I would say a big step up, going from state to U.S. And going from a place like District 50, which has a little over 100 and something thousand people within it, to now the state of Texas, which is because the Senate, we have 2 senators in the state, that is over 30 million. We tipped that in 2024, 30 million people. So being
do you know who he's going to run? Is it Ted Cruz or John Cornyn?
So, all of those are actually going to come to fruition in March.
The primaries. You have to do the primaries first.
Yeah, we're going to do the primaries first. So it's James Tallarico and Colin Allred are.
I know.
Currently,
yeah. He played football.
Yeah, at Baylor.
Yeah,
and then for the Cowboys, I believe, played for a little bit.
Play for the Cowboys? Yeah, sure.
So Colin Allred, and then we have John Cornyn, who is the current incumbent senator here in Texas, and but current Attorney General Ken Paxton has also put in.
Oh, is he running against Cruz or Cornyn?
Cornyn. So Cruz it was the last one. So yeah, Cornyn and
so Cruz is already.
Cruz is in. He'll be in for another 4 more years after these.
That makes sense.
Midterms. So that is, and those are going to be state level elections. They're very big, very expensive. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Okay. So, all right, let's talk about you just for a second, like your history, and then I'd love if you include it, like your faith background and all that. That'd be really cool.
Yeah. So, I wasn't born in Texas. I know if that's a shock to some people. That is the saying. I wasn't born in Texas, but I got here as fast as I could. Truthfully, though, I didn't have a say. My dad worked for the military, so we moved around a lot. Yep. I was born in California, but we moved Texas, California, Texas, California, Texas, California. I think about a half dozen times between the 2 states.
Yeah.
Before he decided he was going to retire.
Okay.
He was done. So having like a home base, we really don't have it. But when I was young, we did have a little bit of a home base with the church that we were going to in Waco for a few years. It was a Catholic church there, St. Albans. And then we were at a Presbyterian church in Sacramento, Granite Bay area, which is where we're living in California.
Yeah.
But that was up until I was about 7.
Yeah.
So a lot of it for me was Sunday school. It was very, I like to think of it as like it was the happy days of, when you hear about stories, biblical stories, we're talking about very, very positive, very reaffirming at that time. And then my dad retired and we stopped going to church. He retired. We moved to South Lake Tahoe, and we tried out a few, and it was more of like he wasn't feeling them, and so we didn't stay involved in any of them. But what we did do was Boy Scouts.
Oh, nice.
And so my brother and I became very involved in Boy Scouts, which kind of kept a little bit of faith for both of us, because there is a religious background. I mean, within Boy Scouts of
Reverend
America,
is one of the values.
Yeah, so that's the I can still recite to you today the Scout Oath and the Scout Law because that was just something that we did all the time, and
that's cool.
We made effort very much at a young age to try and be a part of it and live it. And even now today, I know my brother and I, when we think about it, there are certain things maybe we're not living up to as much as we should, but we both think about it. We're both Eagle Scouts, so it makes a big impact on our lives. So growing up with Scouts was very important to our family. It was, it was our small community.
Right.
I know a lot of people, when they have a church, they have a community there. And so that kind of became our community.
Nice.
With Scouts. So that was like our pillar of we were very much taught, do a good turn daily. So as often as you could, do something good for someone else.
Nice.
And I don't know if you know the history of Boy Scouts, how it kind of got brought to the United States.
How?
So there was this journalist, his name was Boyce. Last name was Boyce. Anyways, he was lost in London. The story goes that he was lost in the London fog and couldn't find his way back to like a hotel. And a young man approached him and said, "Sir, can I help you?" The young boy helped him back to his hotel. And Boyce went to offer him like a little tip saying, "Thank you very much." And he replied, "Sorry, I'm a scout. We don't accept rewards for doing what's right."
Oh, that's awesome.
And that's what like caught off. According to history or weatherological reports, are like there was no fog on that day. It's just, but the truth is, a young man helped him find his hotel. He was lost in.
He needed it to be a foggy day, so he didn't look like a complete imbecile.
Yeah, he needed a foggy day for there to be a reason why he was lost as a grown man in London. But
That's right.
that is true. So. Scouts was very much instilled in us that we are doing what is right, and we are not doing it with expectation of reward. This is not what was instilled in us at a young age. So
That's
it kind
cool.
of kept through.
All right. So then, like, did you graduated from high school? You were an Eagle Scout. What did you do next?
College, but I was beneficial to have a family that I have both parents in our home each night, and my dad went to college, so he's like, "Hey, your next step, you're going to college."
Yeah.
And when we moved for our final time, we moved back to Texas in San Antonio. So I ended up graduating in San Antonio.
UTSA?
Well, for high school.
Oh, high school.
We
Right,
moved back in the middle of high school. My dad picked us up and moved us back to Texas.
Yeah.
Wasn't fun.
Right. Yeah, that's brutal.
But a couple of things about having to move so many times as a young kid, you learn to just make friends everywhere you go. So that was a positive thing about that. But moved to high school in San Antonio, and then graduated. Ended up doing 1 year at UTSA before I transferred to the University of Texas at Austin. So that's what brought me to Austin the first.
Gotcha.
And also my brother, who is immensely smart, got accepted as an out-of-state student to Austin, UT Austin from California. He's a couple years early. He's just super smart guy, bright. And that's what kind of brought my family back to Texas because my mom did not want to be too far from him. She was like, we can be an hour and a half, but not 4 states away.
Nice.
So
when did you kind of get reconnected to church at that, if you kind of drifted away from it, did Boy Scouts, and then when did re-engaging in church?
Re-engaging in church came in college through a few means. I had a friend who just like, you just got to go with me. And I was like, okay, I'll go.
Nice.
I went a couple times, but, and I'm not going to knock on it. I'm not going to mention, but it was just overwhelming the first 2 times I went with him. I said, "Whoa, dude, there's like 1,000 people here. Like, what is this?" It wasn't what I was used to or what I had memories of. And so I was like, "Oh no, I kind of was a bit scared about it because it was overwhelming. There were so many people."
Huh. Was it a church or was it?
It was.
What's it called?
Student ministry,
campus ministry.
No. We went to. This was when I was at UTSA, and we went to First San Antonio Baptist.
Oh, okay.
Downtown there, and like it was
packed.
Yeah.
Oh wow, that's kind of fun. Okay, so then you came to UT.
Came to UT, and I think what really happened was meeting a few people that said, "Hey, come out and check the Austin Stone."
Yeah.
We went and did that.
The
for
downtown.
The like campus one. That's on Austin High.
Yeah, Austin High School. Yeah, great.
So yeah, that's where I kind of said, okay, let's get back into it a little bit. Let's try and refill this.
That wasn't a small crowd.
That one wasn't a small crowd either, but having more people there that I knew,
that was very helpful.
Yeah, that was helpful because yes, I love this guy Sam, who's the one that took me to the San Antonio Baptist, but it was just he and I was like, we know nobody here, dude. You're from Amarillo. I'm brand new to the reintroducing into the church. Like we know nobody, and so that was a little intimidating for me at the time.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so then you go to the Stone, and meet your wife there, or how did that happen?
So actually, I met my wife, and she had heard from a friend about the Stone.
Yeah,
but we didn't meet at the Austin Stone. We met prior. We met in an organization on campus. It was about sports. We both love playing sports, watching sports, all kinds of stuff. And so we met there. And then we had a mutual friend that said, hey, let's check out the Stone. I want to go. He wanted to go. He was from Houston. I think that was like a thing. A lot of college kids were trying to find a place, a church community that they could go to that they felt comfortable. And so that's where we attended the Stone, and we did for a while. And then I graduated.
Yep.
And I had to go back to San Antonio. Not in a bad way.
You had to go to San Antonio.
And this was, so I had to go to San Antonio for my first job, and it was as a college advisor. And I was a college advisor at a high school at Roosevelt High School, down there, go Rough Riders.
Okay.
But it was a program built for near peer assistance with high school students on their next steps.
Okay.
So Advise Texas, you were like the college advisor, but we did more, as much as we could, more than just advising them for college. It was, do you want an apprenticeship program or a certification program that we can get you in touch with? Do you want, are you thinking about military? And I'll help you take your ASVAB. I'll get you signed up for it.
Nice.
But I will tell you, Chris, I always did say, can you do one semester of community college and make sure college is not fit for you? Because it's 6 months. And if you don't like it, hey, then let's get you into the military.
Yeah.
But if you go into the Army and you realize, if you don't like it,
there's no quitting.
There's no quitting. That is a 4 or 5 year commitment sometimes, what you're signing for. I said, okay, so let's make sure.
Especially when they get a bonus to you and you're like, oh, $10,000 for just 2 or 3 more years. Yeah, I'm in.
So I did encourage kids. I was like, hey, just try college. Maybe it's high school that's really not your thing, and not necessarily learning at a university or at a community college. But depending upon what school, the program placed people, recent college grads all over the state: El Paso, Dallas, Houston, the Valley, Austin, San Antonio. And some were small schools that had like 200 people, and some were giant schools. We had a little over 2,000 students at Roosevelt High School.
Oh, wow.
About almost 600 were seniors that year. And so it was one of my responsibilities. And it was to help alleviate a lot of the pressure on guidance counselors.
Sure.
And many of the guidance counselors hadn't been in college for a decade or so or more. And having just been there, I was able to answer questions for kids.
Okay, so that was your first gig out of college.
That was my first gig out of college. And what got me into it was realizing, again, I was fortunate to have a dad that went to college, both parents in my home that were very supportive of whatever we were going to do.
Yeah.
But then realizing, even on my mom's side of my family, there was a few that didn't graduate, cousins who didn't graduate high school. They dropped out of high school. We had, out of 16 of us, 4 of us went to college, 3 of us graduated. So I wanted to try to make a difference there. I wanted to, again, come back and think about, how am I going to help those that need it, whatever it is they need it. So that's really kind of where that base is stuck. And then they're like, okay, you can either do 1 more year of this advising, but 2 years max.
Right.
Because they want near peer. They want somebody who's just in college, who's just done scholarship applications and financial aid talks, and that experience. They want to kind of keep that fresh. So I said, okay. And I found another outreach program through the University of Texas that I had met before. And actually, my girlfriend, who is my wife now, girlfriend at the time, she was a student who had participated in their program. And so I met all of them. Even before I applied, I knew them, knew the team. It was called GeoForce, and it was a geoscience-based outreach program.
Oh, nice.
And we worked with primarily students in Southwest Texas, so Eagle Pass, Del Rio, Uvalde, and all the tiny towns that are around there, which is where my wife's from. She's from Cotulla, Texas, which is about halfway between San Antonio and Laredo.
Oh, fun.
Tiny town. But that was one of their regions. And then Houston was the other region. So worked a lot with GeoForce in Houston. And then again, this was another program taking kids from these schools that maybe don't have science teachers, or science is not a big proponent for their schools, and allowing them to experience hands-on. We're going outside the classroom. We're going to learn about geoscience. We're going to take you to it, and we're going to look at it directly. We're not going to look at a picture of it. We're going to bring in a teacher. We're going to bring in a professor. We're going to have, activities outside we don't want you to just be stuck in a room all day with us. So that's what we did. I was a coordinator for that program. I would lead 45 students and 10 staff to various regions, sometimes outside of the state, Oregon, Washington, or Arizona, to take them to where the geology is.
Yeah.
And I did that for a little over a decade.
Oh, wow. That was like your thing.
That became my thing. I kind of rose through the ranks as the coordinator to slowly be the one that led outside of our director. I was leading the other coordinators, training them.
Oh, that's cool.
For again, it's about, that one was really based in logistical planning and safety. How can we make sure our summer programs are safe?
Right.
But then also, what are we doing for these kids beyond just a summer program?
Nice.
How are we building it out for them? The last thing we want to do is to say, hey, here's us for a couple of summers, and then boom, you're gone out the door and we never see you again. We wanted to build relationships with these kids and know that if they had questions, they can still come back to us about, again, college life, when they're trying to make these big decisions in their lives. What am I going to do for the rest of my life? What am I going to study? And those kinds of things.
It's okay. She didn't do that.
So yeah, that was kind of like the premise behind it, was just trying to make sure that we are really taking care of these kids that we interact with. So that's where I was. And I was there until I became a dad.
Okay.
And when my daughter was born, my wife and I had a deal. We said, hey, whoever is kind of making more money, doing really better, they need to be the one that stays in that job, and the other will step aside and be a stay-at-home parent.
Okay.
My wife, who was working in the healthcare field, left during COVID and started with a tech company.
Oh, nice.
So she just took off from there, did super awesome with that company. And I was like, you do you, and I will take a little change of pace. I'll be a stay-at-home dad, which I'm actually just so thankful for. These first 2 years spending with my daughter have been really impactful for me. And actually this last year has been, okay, how do we want to think about our time together, and then our time as a family, and going to church too. So we made like an effort this year to start going back to Stone. During COVID, we had slowed down again.
Yeah.
And stopped. We were trying to do some online listening.
Super hard.
It was very difficult.
So hard.
But after that, we then, okay, well, let's make an effort. Like I probably need to do more effort on my part. For that. So we started back up again, going to the Austin Stone North Campus.
North Campus?
Yeah.
Okay. So, that's awesome. So how long have you been going there now?
We just started at the beginning of the year. So I guess we're in November now. So it's about 10 months minus, if we're out of town. And things like
sure.
That, so.
Sure. That's awesome.
I got a question. Kind of related. You're sharing stuff about your education. And so in Texas State Representative, you're in the legislative kind of focus, right? So you're lawmaking and stuff like that. Do you have, what are the requirements education-wise for this position?
Probably.
Great question. Oh my gosh, Holland. I didn't know until when James made that decision to step up to U.S. Senate. And I had been thinking about wanting to run, but then I said, okay, well, I'm going to jump in with 2 feet. What do I need? What do I need to make sure I have? You need to be like 18 and a resident of the district in which you are running. And to get on to the ballot, it's $750.
$750. $750. 18 resident.
Oh,
you don't need a law degree.
You don't need a law degree. And actually, can we like jump back a little bit, because being a representative, that actually, in my opinion, it's okay to have a law degree, but you are also not always, if all your representatives are all lawyers, they're not truthfully representative of the community. You need a mix of people. You need educators. You need people in healthcare, people in the service industry to want to step up to those roles.
Because you have lawyers who are going to make all your stuff
for you.
They're going to help you write.
They're going to help you write this.
Because you have a staff. I would assume like James Tallarico, for example, has some sort of a staff.
Yeah, you'll have a small staff that'll help you with the policy making. They'll like a chief of staff and maybe 1 to 2, depending upon. Also, okay, I told y'all like money makes a difference.
Yeah.
If you can use campaign funds. So if I raised a ton of money, I can hire more people throughout the year to be part of my staff because I can use campaign funds to pay for full-time staff if elected.
Oh, wow.
So the people who fundraise more can utilize those funds to say, oh, I need a new analyst for this. I have, $40K. I can hire somebody out part-time and get somebody else on board, which there is an allotment from the state on staffing. But if you want to increase that, it comes from your campaign.
Oh, that makes sense.
And so the big fundraisers can really staff themselves out more. But there always is law servicing, lawyers that are there at the Capitol that will help you. You come to them with the policy. You say, okay, we need to write policy about this. So yeah, you don't need to be a lawyer. You don't need to.
Like I could run if I wanted.
You could
right
run
now. If I could scrounge
actually,
up $750, then I could run.
Actually, you can round up $750, or you can also round up signatures.
Okay.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So
you
wait,
can round
instead
up
of paying, you could get like 750 signatures or something?
Yeah, it's 500 signatures, but you always got to shoot for double because what they do is the state then audits those signatures to make sure they have to be the people in your district. They have to be registered to vote. They have to, and even if somebody like puts their wrong address or like writes ineligible.
Wait, who checks that? All right, that's wild.
There are people, they go through and they check them. And I'll give you a quick story about why it's very important to check that.
Yeah.
There was a gentleman who was running for state house in Illinois that the incumbent said that they weren't going to run, but then at the last minute decided to. Now, Illinois has a slightly different regulation. You have to do a small fee and signatures. Texas, it's an either or.
All right.
But so the incumbent who, an incumbent is the percentages of winning if you're an incumbent are skyrocketed high.
Yeah.
But this incumbent did not get all the signatures they needed.
Oh, wow.
Because they decided they turned around so late. They didn't get all the signatures and they got audited and they were kicked back. Well, the person who decided they were going to run and started on their political career was Barack Obama.
Oh, interesting.
He got into that because the incumbent for that state house seat did not get all of their signatures.
Wow. It's a good story.
It's a good story.
And that,
Good to know.
started him on his trajectory. And so yeah, you can, but also $750.
Which route did you go? 500 signatures or?
So I'm still in the process of the signatures.
Oh, okay.
So, I have a little
But you're
bit.
going the signature route.
I am going the signature route,
for
but
you.
I definitely have a little bit of seed money that started my campaign to say like, hey, I've set this aside. I'm not spending this $750 because I know if I don't hit my numbers, then I am going to make sure I'm on that ballot. I'm not going to do any kind of second guessing.
So how does this affect your decision to be a stay-at-home dad? Like, because being a stay-at-home dad and then also being a Texas representative is kind of like that might put a little. Does that like shift the plans now? She's going to stay at home, or
it does put a little hinder into our plans.
Yeah.
But we are trying to develop. Okay, we have option A, option B, option C, because truthfully, March primaries, that's my first hurdle to overcome.
Yeah, right.
If I don't make it past that hurdle,
Well,
still stay at home dad.
it was a good run.
It was a good run, but that's not going to stop me from now becoming just more involved in certain areas. And then once it comes to actual election day, it would actually be January 2027 by the time I actually go into office. That would be the first few days that I go in. It's January 2027.
And then once you're in office, is this like a Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 kind of deal? Or is it like, I know you have like a session.
Yeah,
There's a session where you're like working crazy hours and the rest of the year, like what's your work schedule like?
Legislative session, right?
The session starts in January and it goes until May.
So crazy busy during that.
It's crazy busy during those like
that's
5 months.
So that's like when you first get elected from January to May, you're doing all the stuff. Is that right? And then
Yeah. So, sorry, I cut you off, Chris.
No,
but
I was just like, because you only do session every other
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
So like you get 1 year to way to go. You get 1 year to run for election, and then 1 year to do the work. Would that be a good way to put that?
that's kind of a good way to put it because, and again, when you're the incumbent and you have that campaign funds, when I talked about you can hold on to, be employing your staff, you can be doing the work to writing those bills that you want so that when you come in day one,
Right.
you are submitting a bill Day 2, I got another bill. Day 3, I got another bill.
Right.
So that we can be efficient in our work during this 5-month session. So
makes sense.
yes, right now, my time leading up until election is going to be campaigning, make sure that I have the people to get those votes so that I'm there. But then
Also preparing any bills that you'd want to submit. Like, are you doing?
so actually what I'm doing is looking at bills that did not pass and reevaluate and say, okay, like, does this seem like a good bill? Why didn't it pass? Okay, let's revamp it maybe and think about how we can change it so we can come to an agreement from each side. And I think that's one of the easier ways to do that, of like, what bills didn't pass? Why didn't they pass? And let's take a look at it.
Oh, nice.
And I think that's, I think that's just a way for me right now to utilize my time wisely rather than, again, diving into data sets, trying to develop policy off of that. I'm going to try and take, okay, they've done the work and let's see what needs to be done further to help bring that together so we can pass it.
Okay. Yeah. So like, what was the thing like that you're like, oh, I am called, I don't know if that's the right word, I want to, like, what was it like, conversation with your wife, you're at church one day, what was the thing that was like, I'm going to go run for office?
Well, it actually started with, I want to volunteer more. I want to volunteer more. I want to volunteer with, campaigns that I feel passionate about. And that's how it kind of started. And then, so I was telling my wife, now that I'm feeling more comfortable as a stay-at-home dad, that first year, little like worried about keeping a baby alive and all of that. I'm just being honest. I was very focused on that and her, for my daughter. After that, now I'm like, okay, I have a little bit more comfort. I feel like now we can get more involved. I feel, better if I need to say, hey, I'm going to go out and do this for 3 hours. If somebody can babysit, more comfortable. And so I told my wife, I said, I want to start volunteering more. I want to, so I started looking out for things that I could become a part of. And, James is our representative here. I was like, okay, well, if I want to learn it, his campaign to re-elect, okay, I'll jump in and I'll learn what it's like to be in a campaign. What are the ins and outs? And then when he decided, I was like, well, he's not running for House District 50 anymore. And I told my wife, I was like, somebody needs to do something about that. Like, we can't, something needs to be done. So she looked at me and she was like, you've been talking about wanting to become more involved. I have my degrees in history and politics, political science. So, this isn't like a super far jump for me to say, going from one to another. Politics has always kind of been in my background. Anytime there's news, usually my wife's like, hey, what's the news? And I'll fill her in because that's what I'll try to absorb throughout the day. And even so, being a stay-at-home dad, I took that opportunity as if I have. Let me rephrase this. Again, going back to being a scout, there's a portion in that scout oath that talks about keeping yourself mentally awake. When my daughter and I was taking my dog for walks each day, and I realized like here is an hour to 2 hours that nothing is going on. What can I do to fill this time? At first, I was like, oh, I'll put some music. I don't know. Music isn't doing it for me. Music is, it's kind of like I'm wasting a little bit of time. So then I put on like NPR and I was like, okay, NPR is good for like 20 minutes and then it reruns and then...
You can listen to NPR. It's really boring.
And so I was like, I can't do NPR. So then I started listening to books.
Nice.
I started doing audiobooks as much as I could. And my goal was to have books that are from both sides. I picked books that were on poverty or memoirs of people, like John McCain, Obama, Liz Cheney, book on, from Desmond Howard on poverty. So I tried to keep myself not just in one compartment. I wanted to hear from everybody so that I can understand, if somebody has a different opinion of me, hopefully I'm doing my best to understand where they're coming from. So I took that time to really start diving into some of these things, and they were all very politically based.
Sure.
So then again, talking to my wife a lot about like, I would give her updates on my book that I'm reading this week. And then it kind of came to the point where, again, James decided to run for U.S. Senate. She's like, you've been talking about this.
Right.
What is holding you up? So it was a a push from my wife to say like, this is what you kind of dreamt about a little bit.
Yeah.
So let's go for it.
So like James Tallarico is like one of those guys that's been very, like he was on Joe Rogan's podcast. And you know, he is a guy that kind of works across the aisle more than most, but is very left. I mean, if is where I would say like he's a, you know, dyed-in-the-wool progressive Democrat. And so for us, we're like, that's kind of opposite of the spectrum from where we're at. But would love to kind of hear like, what are the things that you thought were like, man, he killed it on, like, man, this is like Tallarico crushed it on this issue. And I really want to follow that.
Okay. So yeah, Chris, Holland, you're probably going to find me a little bit left too. All right.
That's fine.
Okay. But there are a few things, and I was like, okay, remember when I was talking about diving into some of these bills that, you know, didn't get passed or whatever. So it also led me into like looking at how many times have y'all looked to see what your state representative has actually filed?
Zero.
Right. Yeah. Like,
right. It's all on the website. It's very actually easy to look up if you want to see, man, what does my rep even do?
Yeah. I've looked at stuff. I've followed him like on social media and but in order to find actual bills, like a list of them, I didn't even know you could do that. So I'm familiar with stuff from social media, but to know, tell us more.
Yeah. So and I started with social media with James too. And so, really the state holds on to it all, and it'll give you a list. It'll tell you how many they authored, co-authored, and or sponsored.
So where do you find that?
It's on the state website.
Okay. Like texas.gov something?
It's the Secretary of State's.
Okay.
Will hold a lot of that information. I think the best way to go about it is just Texas House Representatives, and it'll take you to the Texas House website, and then you can look up who your representative is. So especially if you don't live in District 50, whoever's listening here, if you're outside of that, look up your representative and you can see what have they authored for each legislative session that they are part of. So it does take a little bit of footwork because it'll show you right now the 89th legislative session. So that was this last year. 2025.
Right.
Yeah, that's that. Yeah, it was
January to May of 2025.
Right, it really just happened.
Right.
So it'll go through all what they submitted there, and then you can look up each bill that they wrote or authored and then co-authored, and you can then click on that bill. It'll show you the text, and it'll show you how did it progress.
Yeah.
It was presented to the floor. It was sent to a committee. Did it make it out of the committee? Did it go for a vote? It'll give you a little timeline, a little timeline of it, and then it'll also show you what the original text was. PDF versions, original text, and if it was updated or changed, so you can really look at some of those. So I have been looking at some of those, and some that I wanted to like highlight that I thought was like, okay, one that definitely that made it across was creation of a commission on marriage and family.
Yeah.
So he co-authored a bill that created a commission that did pass. And it is to investigate Texas families and what is happening to them. Why is divorce rate high? Are they taking classes before they're getting married? Who is authorizing marriages? When there's families, when there are children involved, what kind of classes are they taking before there's a break in the family?
Yeah.
So it's supposed to investigate to try and build stronger support for families here in Texas, and their report's going to come out I think it's like the end of 2026.
So essentially at the end of that, it'll say like, oh, okay, the reason why people are getting divorced is they went to Vegas and they came back or whatever.
Yeah. It's going to come back. Like, hey, we have this many people that got married that did not take any kind of premarital classes. So they didn't have any kind of preparation for what marriage is like, because marriage is a big step in our life. And I'm very thankful for the premarital class that I got through the Austin Stone.
Nice.
Who was, kept me in touch with a lot of people. But yeah, so that's what it's going to do. It's going to try to evaluate why we have the divorce rate that we do here in Texas, why we have families that have just single parent families, and say, what can we recommend to try and mend this situation? Because, again, I'm super thankful that I grew up with both parents in the household. I'm so thankful for that. And when we experience, or when kids experience that, it is beneficial for them when they have the two parents in the household.
Right. Yeah.
And and having worked with high school students of all varying economic backgrounds in their family, it definitely made a difference. You could see when both parents were involved, very eager to assist or what was beneficial for their kid, versus parents that were late picking their kid up who had been gone for a week. Like, there were times where I'd be waiting at an airport with a kid for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and we had been gone for a week. It was like, hey, everything was scheduled to be picked up, but parents were on their own time.
Gosh,
so
that's hard.
Yeah.
Okay, so that like that. What about things like what other did Tallarico author that you're like? Because he authored that bill.
He was a co-author.
Or is it a resolution that or what was that?
That was a House bill.
So the House bill was like, hey, we commissioned this study.
Yeah.
Okay, and then what other bills did he do that you?
There was one that didn't make it out that I thought was actually pretty interesting for healthcare. It was called a prescription drug purchasing pool that would help employers pull and insurance plans pull prescription drug purchases to help alleviate costs of prescription drugs.
Yeah.
And that one didn't make it out of committee.
What was
I don't know why. So, but there are when we dive further, more diving to do. You can go in and see that they have notes on it.
Yeah, I got it pulled up here. I found it. I'm 51, but I just pulled up his on 50, and he's got 68 bills submitted. And yeah, you can see them just a list.
That's wild.
Scroll them all.
Okay, yeah.
And there's a little, each one has a topic line to show you. So if it's like, oh, this seems interesting, let me look more into it. Others are kind of basic, and you're like, okay, this is maybe a correction of literature or correction of wording in a particular bill, so there can be an amendments in there. And that's the thing about why it's important to, when the lawyers are making this, because words that are used are very important.
Yeah.
And I always like to, when I tell people why that's so important, I give this quick little story that I was in jury duty. I didn't get selected because the case involved kids, and having worked with kids, they didn't want me to part as a jury. But the judge sat us down for about an hour, and he really talked to us about the use of words and why it's so important. Because, let me just kind of give you all this test. If I were to say, finish this quote or sentence, you are innocent
until proven guilty.
Until proven guilty. And that's what everybody says, but it is wrong.
Huh.
That's what we hear in the movies and in TV shows, and it's that word until. Because until means it will eventually come to fruition. Like, this person is innocent until we prove them guilty. And until carries that context that it will happen. And so he hammered into us, it is unless. Unless. And so he said, but the problem is, TVs and movies, they carry this and this word until always. But even though it doesn't seem like it at first, here when we sit in the courtrooms, like, that carries a little bit into everybody's mind until, like, well, he's innocent until we prove him guilty.
Okay.
So that's why it's super important to make sure when these lawyers and policymakers are writing laws, why words matter. Sometimes it's super vague, and that actually can kill a bill if it's just too vague, because policymakers want a little bit of flexibility about it. But so they say, okay, well, let's make it a little bit more vague and not so specific. And there are pros and cons to that, because it allows for interpretation for future generations. So like the Texas Constitution, we have quite a few amendments, and that's because we were pretty specific in our original writing of the Texas Constitution. So we have to kind of come back and say, well, things should not, if there's a problem between people, it shouldn't be, if it's more than $5, which was a lot of money back in 1836,
right? Versus
now it's $5. Does that go to a criminal court with a different jury, or should that be handled in civil and lower? So the proper use of words is very specific, very meaningful when writing these laws, and so it makes a difference.
Yeah, one of the things, like, I'm just kind of looking through his things he proposed. Did you have any? Were you just on the campaign, or were you actually part of any sort of volunteer staff role? Or
no, I just did a little bit of. I just did a little bit of.
That's good.
Discussion with people in the neighborhood about him, but to be honest with you, everybody in the Wells Branch neighborhood knows James, knows of him, or knows him because this is where he
His
where
dad
his
goes to
family is.
church right down the street at St. Andrews.
Yeah.
From Round Rock, right?
Yeah, he went to Round Rock High. I think he grew up in Wells Branch.
Okay.
Yeah, well, his family lives here now,
Right,
so
yeah.
it's everybody is like, oh yeah, I know James. I'm like, I don't really need to, explain
right.
to you what his positions are on a lot of things because he's, you know him.
Yeah. So one of the things that he put out there, I'd love to hear your thought on this. Obviously, I know you didn't write the bill, but he put reproductive health access protects out-of-state abortion travel, expands contraception coverage under state insurance. So obviously, it got blocked in the Senate, but like that was his plan. It was like, hey, I know Texas has banned abortion. Like I want to send this thing to other states. What were your thoughts on that?
So yeah, first I always want to kind of any discussion about abortion. I want to emphasize I am a man and I will not have that decision ever placed upon me. Really, like, so talking to my wife a lot about this. That's kind of like one of the cornerstones that I use is like, okay, talk to me about it. And she said, well, you're never going to experience it being pregnant. I'm a guy. So want you to listen to, what I have to say. So when he went through with that, I said, okay, when Roe v. Wade was overturned several years ago, that kind of was like, well, it took it back to the states. That's what it didn't necessarily ban abortion, right? Roe v. Wade overturning with the Dobbs-Jackson, like that didn't outlaw it. It returned that decision back to the states.
Right.
So the state of Texas had already a bill on hand that if it ever got overturned, it would enact very quickly. And when we returned things to the states, but then we started saying, well, you can't go to a different state to do it, even if that other state does allow it. Missouri was trying to enact some that made it illegal to travel between state lines to receive that abortion. And I think that was a little overstepping for a state to say you can't travel between state lines if you want to do that. Now, the state, again, it's deciding what can be done within state boundaries. Now, if you're traveling outside of the state, again, that is they're right. If that other state allows it, if a state like California, New Mexico, if they allow it and you want to go there for that, then that is your right.
Yeah, I guess my hardest part with that is like, as Christians, we look at,
That it is such a super tough conversation.
It's murder, right? So whether it's in a woman's body or my body, like I think the reason why it becomes such a valuable thing, it's like human dignity, and you get to a place where now all of a sudden you're ending someone's life before it even started. And man, that's a dangerous place to go. And I understand people are in hard situations. And as a man, I'm not going to be in those. However, as a man, I can say like, I don't want evil to like when we start dehumanizing people to that extent. And that's why I'm like, as a state of Texas, now granted, it didn't get passed, but to say like, hey, I want to make sure I fund the ability for this pregnant mother to go to a different state where it's legal there to kind of get around the state laws that we have. It just, to me, that to me is like, wow, that's so hard that we would, we'd say, hey, we don't want to murder here in Texas, but you can do that outside of Texas. And I know, granted, that's such a hard word, but I think that's really what it is. Unless you're like, life begins when. I think that's the problem.
Okay, that's a great thing to have that conversation about because there are actually really no federal laws on when life begins. It is up to the states. The states have the ones that have made those distinctions.
Yeah.
So federal law, there is no when life begins. And that's where a lot of conversation where people have, well, it's, upon conception or is it upon first breath? That is taken like when does life begin? Is it upon viability?
Yeah.
And again,
yeah.
It
to me, I look at that and it's like, we save like baby dolphins in the womb or like baby elephants in the womb. Like it's illegal to kill them. And so if we give animals more rights than humans, that's the part where I just go, oh, that's a hard thing for me to take in because I'm like, we've just elevated animals over human beings out of like a sense of we feel bad for the mother that doesn't have a lot of support. But granted, there's a gazillion number of people that are trying to adopt kids right now. And so that to me is like, personally, it makes me like, oh, wounded, hurt for just life that's not given a chance. That's where I feel like as Christians, we need to kind of like echo that, because the law, like I like what you said, like there is no law. And so what happens is, we have God's word, and, we are given our rights not by the law, but as a constitution by our creator. And I think that's the part where if we give up on the creator, if we give up on God and say like, hey, what do we all think about this? Then you're inevitably going to kind of get to a place of, it's not going to be God's word. It's going to be our public opinion, and that can just be a dangerous spot. So that's where I feel like you end up marginalizing people, and you end up like, that's how stuff like the darkness can kind of creep in when you talk about, like, when we think about Planned Parenthood and how it was started. It was like a eugenic worldview of, I want to eliminate African Americans, so I'm going to go and put Planned Parenthoods or abortion clinics in all these low income neighborhoods to make sure that they kill themselves off. And I think that part is just kind of hard for me as a Christian to kind of lean into that and go, whoa, gosh, what's happening? So I know that, I don't know where your stance is on that, but I think that's what, as I was looking at what Tallarico put out, that's where I would push back on him and be like, hey, I appreciate some of the other things that you're doing, but man, that's hard for me to handle.
It is. I want to take one step back for that. Yeah. That Planned Parenthood original, like back in like 1890, it was for contraceptive. That's what women wanted. They wanted to be able to have the decision of when they could. Then it's something that's thought of like, it's a good start, but then the use of it became, you're right, putting it into low-income areas where they knew people who said, if I have a decision, am I going to have another baby that's going to put a financial burden on me, or am I going to opt out? And that did actually affect a lot of communities, but that origin of it started with the attention of like family planning.
Sure.
And women have that right to decide when they want to have a child. And at that point in time, there was, certain state laws or certain local ordinances against like handing out contraceptives to women to say, hey, if you're not ready to be pregnant but you're married, here's a condom. Sure. And then they were like, oh, can't do that.
Yeah.
But you're right. It is a very difficult subject.
And I think what makes it hard is it's not like they said, hey, let's go to the white neighborhoods and hand these out. Let's go to the poor, more minority neighborhoods to hand this out because we don't want more of them born. That's kind of where I look at that. The racial intent of that kind of gets me all sort of fired up. And so I get it that you kind of look at, we don't want to put too much on families because they can't afford it and all that. But I'm like, the intent was, let's limit birth because we don't want those people here. And so that's where as a Christian, I go, man, that's a dignity of humanity. That's one of those issues. And so, and granted, that was what, 1916 or something? Yeah,
50s, 60s.
Well, 1916 is when I think Planned Parenthood started with the first birth control clinic, and then it eventually kind of went from there. But and so Margaret Sanger from 1916 probably had a way different worldview than we do today. However, I think it was I want to eliminate those people. It wasn't, I want to see the flourishing of that community. And I think that's where I sort of struggle. Like, we want to see the flourishing of the culture. And so anyway, when death becomes a part of it, which eventually it kind of, I'll give it to you. Like, it was like, at first we just want to limit the amount of births that were going on. Although it was minority births, they wanted to limit. I would say it got to a point of death. And that's where, when you start advocating for death and like affirming it, now we're in this dangerous place where we like millions of kids or babies were terminated. And that just, as a Christian, that breaks my heart. Not because I'm like, one championing abortion or pro-life, but because like that's not God's desire and heart for humanity to see it flourish. I don't know.
I think it's an important conversation because you're talking about being in a position of legislating. You're making laws. All laws have some kind of moral foundation, and the question is going to be, which morals are they? So as a Christian, you go, okay, we got to get our morals from God's word. There may not be currently a federal law about this, but as Christians, we got to legislate off of what God's word says is true. That's what Scripture says. A civil magistrate, a public governing ruler, public official, has a responsibility before God. Yeah. And so why this is really good is like, our job as pastors is not to write bills. unless we were also to become a representative.
Right.
But and in the same way, your job as a state representative would not be to administer communion on a Sunday. So there's a separation and different spheres of work, but the conversation is important because the church's role is to speak to the civil magistrate, speak to political officials. And say, hey, we need to have laws that reflect the truth and justice and morality of Scripture. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and you're talking about conversation, and that definitely needs to be done.
Yeah.
And also listening on our part, listening from the people, listening from communities.
Yeah.
Because what are their desires? And again, if we come to the point where it's like the church community is saying, here is what we want, then that should be my role as a representative.
Yeah.
Whether it might be even against what I want, but if that is what that conversation is.
I mean, unless it goes against God's law, right?
Unless we're talking about if it is something that's immoral.
Ultimately, you're accountable to God first.
Yeah, if it's an immoral act that everybody's saying we need to do this, okay, whoa, then let's pump the brakes on that.
Like slavery, like we would go, okay, let's.
Yeah, that's
when someone comes up talking like that craziness, we're like, no problem. Like we need to shut that down. We're not going to do that. I think that's the problem. I think for a lot of us that we face is that we can look at maybe a cultural era where one sin was like prioritized and like sort of advocated for, and then it took the church then having influence on the rest of the culture for that to be shut down and the inhumane treatment of people like that to be stopped. Which was obviously that's the role of the church to speak prophetically into the culture and to the state. As government has the power of the sword to enforce law and to do all that, and the church has the prophetic voice to say, "Hey, here's the things that we need to see: justice and righteousness, and that, and then to take care of the poor and to kind of love on people and to guide them spiritually." And then the family ultimately is where people are raised up. So I just bring that up as like, I know you didn't have anything to do with writing it, but I do feel like it's important to kind of what Holland was saying. It's like where do people's rights come from? And I think that's that one question. Oh, she is such a sweetie. She is so cute.
I think like what people would be interested to hear, for you as a representative, or what I'm interested to hear, is, are you going to, when you get your bills ready, to present them, is the moral foundation of those things going to be the teaching of Scripture and the morality of what the Christian faith says is true, or are you going to be looking more to some other direction or source for that?
That's a good question because again, we talked about how I grew up not having church all the time, but the pillars that were there, like I said, Scouts does still have that faith-based in that, and y'all look up the Scout law and look up the Scout oath, and those are the things that we try to again adhere to, and I try to adhere to. And you're going to see in there, it's on my honor, I'll do my best to do my duty to God and my country, obey the Scout law, keep myself physically fit, mentally awake, and morally straight.
Love it.
And so, and again, that last part, morally straight, mentally awake, we've talked a little bit about that. So those are the areas where I'm coming from, and they do have a bit of basis within Scripture because that's where Scouts was based in. But beyond that, to also talk about this abortion conversation, it also needs to include what support there is for that mother.
Sure.
It can't just be like hey, don't do this, like you can't get abortion, and then that's the end of the conversation. It also needs to say, here's support. Here's our state of Texas, we don't have maternity leave for women who are working. And if they don't have support, they either need to take vacation time, take FMLA, which is an unpaid. We don't have support for them. So we also need to have that conversation of like, okay, if we are going to make sure that we are having women bring babies into this world, we need to take care of them as well, because I think is a transition.
That's good.
Those first few weeks, which of the sleepless nights and those kinds of things, if that person is then expected to say, take care of a baby, drop them off at daycare, go to work for 8 hours, come back, pick them up from daycare, spend the night with them, even though you're only getting a few hours of sleep, and just keep repeating that also is, in a sense, not taking care of people.
Right. We have a lot of teen moms here. And so we're very familiar with this. And it'd be like, it's one of those things where it's like, I want if you're like, hey, what's the plan? Hey, local church, hey, community of faith, rally around this person, because then you have the life support, and then people who are. What happens when you start off with, giving people money in some way, even if it's just family leave, then there's an expectation the government's going to solve that problem, and man, then you take the ability and the personal touch away from the community to wrap their arms around a person and help them grow. And I think that it's like where in some ways, it's what a blessing when the government's going to step in and kind of provide money here. But the negative consequence of that is it prevents the community to come together because, the government has taken care of. Does that make sense? That's the part that I sort of, I kind of get, not that I'm like anti-helping people, but I'd love to see the personal touch. Like I just talked to a woman that just had a single mom who's 20. She chose not to have an abortion, and I was like, "Hey, way to go! I'm so proud of you. What do you need?" And we're gonna provide. A family took her in. Like those are the kind of cool things that I feel like would be really special to give the church a chance, give the community of faith a chance to really invest in people's lives. And again, this comes from maybe this is not overly idealistic perspective, but I really feel like the church would love to step into that realm.
Okay, that would be a wonderful thing, right? If you have that communities, but not everybody does have a church community. Not everybody goes to church, and so when they're faced with that situation, a lot of time it is a very independent situation. They're very, by themselves if they don't have that church community. And then, so
I guess that's my point is then they let's say we gave them money, it would prolong their independence and lack of community. And I know we all want everyone to have they get to choose whatever community that they want. But at some point when someone loves you really, really well, and they're involved in your life for your benefit at their expense, that blessing is so powerful. So in my head, why not send some of that money to the community of faith and go like, hey, are you guys going to take care of these people? I want to see the record of you guys stepping into people's lives. And then all of a sudden now you have the ability for the church to really kind of support the system and infrastructure, because we already have the system of support for people that are in need. Our little church, we give away about $130,000, $140,000 away to help people pay rent, to help people, when their transmission goes out, all the different things of when their lives fall apart. We're involved in their lives, and I think it's a beautiful, sweet thing. But sometimes, if people are just looking for the check, what's really great about this, you have the personal aspect of people invest in their life as opposed to a check that comes from the government and then go figure it out. So and I know there's social workers, but it feels like the social worker is working the 9 to 5, and if you don't get in my hours, then I'm sorry. Whereas church people, they're up all hours of the night, serving, loving, caring for people. It's kind of what we do. And we're built for it because we have this mission, this great mission that comes from God to love, serve, care for the poor, to love, care, and serve for those who are in need. And I'm not saying that anyone's intentionally robbing the church of doing that, but when you can get money independent of any person, you're going to take it. And so I think that almost robs them of the community they desperately need. That's my opinion on that. And you can take it for what it's worth.
No, I think community is a great thing. When people don't have community, that is a tough road to go down if you don't have community, whatever that community is.
Sure.
And churches provide a wonderful community.
Right.
Like I said, Scouts, that was a community for us, especially as a kid growing up, that you had that group there.
Yeah.
It is important to have them. My dad, having retired, kind of fell into that role of, well, what does the community here need?
Right.
And he helped. He retired,
Veterans
so he had
crushed it at that stuff.
and he was great about just saying, all right, well, if we need this, if we need somebody to go and fundraise for this, if we need that, if this community needs it. And there'd be times where, he volunteered so much, and he got to take me along to a few things, and it still sticks with me today. I was in 7th grade that his local Kiwanis club did a Christmas thing for a few kids.
Yeah.
And I got to be the one that helped out, pick out some of those gifts and take them to these families.
Yeah. So good.
And it still impacts me to the day, seeing expression of gratitude that these families are supported by a community. So again, you're talking about communities, and the church is a wonderful community. That's why, Wells Branch Community Church. It's not.
Yeah.
So That is important, but you did kind of step into here with, if that money could flow from the government out to the churches, and that's the thing that's going to be stopped right there. I think we had a conversation a little bit about that, and I looked up, I wrote it down. I think it's the Lemon versus Kurtzman Supreme Court that put the end of, I think certain states were trying to use tax money to then fund teacher salaries at private schools. And that was where the Supreme Court came in. This is in the 70s.
Yeah, I think 71.
Yeah. So they came in and they said, okay, nope, we're putting up a block here because we're not going to allow that. So when that conversation is going to be a very tough one to try to overcome.
Because now you're going against the Supreme Court.
Yeah, now you're going against the Supreme Court. But the message should still be there. The message of saying
because the government does give money to NGOs of all sorts that are helping people do all sorts of things.
Yeah.
But I do feel like Austin, even the city of Austin, and maybe this is the city of Austin, might be different. Because they really help support Community First. I think with what's the guy's name at Community First?
Oh, the Mobile Loaves and Fishes. Yeah. Chris. Is it Chris or is it?
Who was it? Yeah, I can't remember. It's right behind my house.
Yeah.
Alan
Graham.
Yeah.
Bam.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So because I think they receive public funding of some sort, but they're not a church. They're just a faith-based. Anyway, but they are that kind of thing, and what they got going over there is awesome.
Yeah, I love Community First. I went this last year. We took this little one to go see the lights that they have there. So cool. My wife and I have donated. Thank you to that was PBS to introduce us to that. They did a special on them 1 year. And I'm like, whoa,
that's right down the road.
That's right over there. I had zero clue about it. But then we started getting into a conversation about here's an organization that's definitely helping out unhoused people, and their method is effective. It's not.
Right. Everything is effective
up until a point.
Yeah.
And also, scale wise, it's something you can't scale super huge. It does have to, it's impacting a smaller bit of that community, but it is impacting them and it is effective in certain ways. So
yeah, I got to preach there. They, invited me out and I came and preached there and it was wonderful. I truly was blessed by everybody at Community First, but I do feel like they have at least some public support there. I know, and I don't want to get into it more because you're like, hey, I'd love to do that, but Supreme Court, you can't do that.
It would make it difficult.
Yeah.
Make it difficult.
Can I add one thing?
Yeah.
Just going back, just to, we're here, you're running for this office, this public office, we're pastors. You made a comment earlier about I would never understand the abortion, situation as a man, right? And I think obviously true. There's a sense of
a limit to how much I can understand.
Yeah,
maybe that's a better way to phrase it. But
right. My encouragement would just be to you when it comes to bills and legislation, stand on God's word. There might be a lot of situations or issues that you go, man, me as this or as that can't fully understand, and there's sympathy there, but at the end of the day, when it comes to law, we got to stand. If God's word says that this is wrong, then it doesn't matter, if I don't understand it. I've got to stand on what God's word says. And I think what at least for me personally, what I would love to see in public officials and government and politics is Christians stepping into these places willing to stand firmly on God's word and say, we're going to legislate according to what God says is right and wrong. We're going to legislate according to what Scripture says is true, and use that as the moral foundation. And so I would just commend that to you and encourage you in that. Let the Scriptures really be, your moral foundation. When it comes to these, the question is, what does the Bible say about when life begins? Not what the federal government says, not what, it's what does Scripture say about the dignity of human life as image bearers, when life begins, those types of things. Does that make sense?
It does. And that's going to be a conversation had dozens and dozens of more times,
sure.
And I think even within, certain church circles on not church circles, but religious circles, when does life begin? They're going to have that conversation because I think there are even going to be small sects of the Christian church that will not view it as conception. And
if you go, what's really hard is running as a Democrat, then you're going to have a really tough go because I think the platform is very much about was it reproductive freedom is the way they would put that. It's like, and so that would just go counter to the whole party. So just something to I don't think about.
It's not my top thing, that's it's
Sure.
there. It's definitely something I think needs to be considered and talked about and
But I think
bills put to law.
So schools, I think, is one of your top things.
Yes, public education.
So
in Texas.
one of the things that is Austin ISD is part of your,
Austin ISD is part of the district, and so is
you
Round Rock
Austin,
and Pflugerville.
Pflugerville, Round Rock.
Yeah.
Do you like, what kind of role do you? I mean, how does the
So, like, what would the legislative branch of the government have to do with?
like, what would you even
with that
be able to do?
So, conversation I think is going to be more along the lines of what we would then instruct certain organizations to do. It would be a bill that would put forth to instruct the Texas Education Agency that, hey, this is what needs to be done, whether it's a commission like we talked about earlier that, the team put together on marriage and family. Like, we need a review of said X, Y, and Z to see what is more beneficial for our students. So that would be like the first conversations we probably have. And then based upon those, then enact something that would probably be, once again, it's probably going to be working with State Board of Education and the Texas Education Agency, because those are the overarching entities which oversee curriculum, testing, and things like that.
Yeah.
So
go ahead.
yeah, but like funding though, the funding aspect comes from like what the legislature kind of dictates the amount per student that you would receive for those that show up at second period on those days. Because like,
Gosh, that's tough. That's wild stuff. Yeah. Because I think there was even Tallarico put in a bill that wanted to increase like teacher pay like for like $5,000 annual. He's the one that kind of got $5,000 annual bonuses for educators in high poverty schools, which passed. Which way to go! And then he also put something out he wanted to increase per student funding by $500, I guess, a kid, and with fair distribution to low wealth districts with ties to teacher pay raises, and that got stuck in committee. So I do appreciate like that aspect of him having kind of an eye on education. But the one thing I'm noticing, at least it's in the news a lot, Austin ISD schools have a lot of F ratings, which affects property values, which affects, I'm not going to put my kids in those schools. And it's like, I'm out. Like, it's a lot of like smart kid flight to the charter schools or to the private schools, or they're just going to move.
They're going to go out to like Eanes ISD, which is just across that way.
Right. Yeah. Or like,
that way.
Yeah. So I'm like, what, I don't know if this might even be beyond anyone's pay grade, but like, have you thought through solutions on what could be a solution for that? Just the problem of failing schools? Yeah.
So first, I think reevaluating how schools are funded. It's property tax. It's done. Majority is how schools are funded.
Yeah.
And we used to have this, we implemented a while ago, a couple decades ago, the Robin Hood program.
Yeah.
My dad hated it, but he hated it, but said, I understand it. And where we lived in San Antonio was a very wealthy area. It was the Alamo Heights Independent School District.
Yeah.
And he would tell me all the time, gosh, your school district gives away X amount of dollars. And I said, oh, that's horrible. But having been to school there the teachers that they were able to employ, because they were able to provide a little bit better.
Right.
They were providing a salary that teachers could live in the district.
Right.
We had many teachers that had kids that were in the schools. So teachers were living in the district. Teachers were staying there. There was not turnover as we see in some of these bigger districts.
Yeah. If you go to Austin ISD, a teacher probably knew, let's say she's fresh out of UT and she gets thrashed because she's like, we actually had because we were here at Wells Branch at Jolie Johnson Elementary, and we had a really great teacher. And she was like, I'm quitting. Like it was her first year. She taught our kid kindergarten. She's like, I'm out. My wife, who was a teacher, she's like, don't quit. Just move to a different school. Don't quit. And now she lived happily ever after. I think she's in like Leander or something. Anyway, I think there's like, the schools are so like the conduct, the kids' attitudes, which makes the teachers like, I'm out.
Yeah.
Or like, they're just in survival mode. And again, this gets into like, as someone who's just sort of observing, I know there's F ratings that the T gives, and I know that they're trying to put in new curriculum. They're trying to, they've taken over Houston ISD,
and just Fort Worth.
Fort Worth is taken over, and now Houston had the greatest
they've had a good turnaround.
It's wild.
They've had a good turnaround. They've had some issues with that, though. They've had a dip in their student population. They've gone from 190,000 students in 2023 when the takeover happened. They've dropped like 5% of their student population because families don't want their kids in those schools to say like, hey, we've now lost that community. We've decided who the school board is and what they're going to do, and they lose that. And so there has been
what's interesting, the people that left were probably the people that could leave. And so that's where I'm like, they somehow turned it around with the lowest income kids that couldn't leave, that were stuck. And they turned it around at Houston ISD. And my only thinking, and this is probably way beyond what you could do as a Texas state representative, but why not make, like, I know we're all about freedom and school boards, but man, wouldn't it be great if you had like a top down, like, here's the one system, and here are all of our, like, kind of like how UT has like all its schools, UT Arlington or UT UTSA. It's all part of the University of Texas school system or whatever. To me, it seems like, man, what an opportunity to kind of make it a uniform standards where people could kind of move in and out, and you're kind of like, it's the Army. I would love for teachers to kind of like, hey, you have to serve your time, just like everyone has to go to Fort Hood at some point. You go serve your time there, and then, you kind of get moved up, and you're based on your meritocracy of teaching. I don't know. That's just my thought on it. I don't know if you have any other thoughts.
That is, yeah, it does sound like, that's the Army, because then you're very, very, everything is the same across the board, which is, you're right. El Paso district versus somewhere down in the district, and down like in the Valley versus Dallas versus small school districts. It all depends upon like how much money do they have at the time. What by kind of standardizing everything, that's really some people are gonna view that as like, oh, that's
totalitarian or whatever.
Distribution of the same thing for everybody. Better school districts are gonna hate that.
Yeah.
The school districts like Eanes is gonna be like, no, we're doing fine. Do not touch us.
Don't touch us.
Whereas some of those schools that are maybe struggling, they're going to be like, well, that might be an option, because then you can kind of come over and maybe we can focus on other things to help us turn around. And there are 3 things I would like us to consider when, like, how can we improve schools? First off, it is a safe environment. So, and that can be broken down. Safe from exterior entities.
Kind of like a hardening of the schools. Is that the right word for it? Like where you...
I don't know, hardening. The program I worked for, GeoForce, I worked in Uvalde ISD. I worked at the high school. I worked at the middle school.
Oh, wow.
So I was 1 degree of separation from what happened at Robb Elementary. Wow. I knew the teachers. I didn't know anybody personally that was affected, but I felt the community.
Yeah.
So we need to first talk about, okay, secure schools, a safe environment from exterior, but also a safe interior. So that is, you've talked about it with Jolie Johnson.
Yeah.
Teachers need to be safe.
Yeah.
Students need to be safe for one another. So we need to have a safe environment for our students.
Right.
So that's something we need to work on for our school districts.
What do you think I literally don't know. I'm just like, what would you do to make it more safer? Like, you'd almost have like a bodyguard in there for the teacher or something. I don't know. I have no idea.
I feel like bodyguard kind of getting into like a
like
George Orwell 1984, really watching everybody. But sometimes, especially in schools, like camera systems.
There you go. Simple cameras.
Camera systems should be utilized to make sure that
are they allowed to have cameras on classrooms?
In certain areas, but I don't know if all classrooms are allowed to have that. That's a great question. That's something I think we should look into. Like if classrooms are allowed to have them.
There's like a privacy thing or something about that?
But there shouldn't be.
Right.
Like a classroom should be for learning.
Right.
And if when teachers have their break period, if it's in the classroom and they allow students to come in, that should still be visible.
Yeah.
We were always taught anytime you were interacting with students, it's a 2-to-1 rule. Either 2 students or one adult, one or 2 adults, 1 student, always have that 2-to-1 rule. So, and if cameras allow you to kind of make sure that that's always a thing, then why not? And that's here. I feel like we're bouncing ideas. What can we get to?
Let's go put a bill together.
Like first is always safe environment, both exterior safe, but interior safe. So teachers need to feel safe, because anybody who works in any job, if you don't feel safe, you don't want to work there.
Right.
And teachers, let's be honest, teachers go to teach because they love that idea of teaching. Teaching is such a a difficult profession, because working with, whether it's elementary age students, you have to have that love of kids that are just going to ask you why, what, all the time. Or if you're working with middle school students, who I think are the toughest to deal with, in terms of like, they're still learning how to communicate, how to act. And as a teacher, you're trying to control them in a room. It's a tough job, but if you want to be a teacher, like, I am all for commending you for that. So you need to be safe. You need to have safety in your school, because if you are not, you're not going to want to do it long. And then again, we're talking about teacher turnover. They're going to come in, not feel safe, and leave. So safe environment, a quality education. So we've had a lot of shifts. So school boards are allowed to kind of identify what type of education they're going to put forth. And again, that's where parents have that opportunity to choose their school board and where they're going with that.
Right.
So that should be, again, if we want to talk about parents, hey, your school board matters. So if you have not voted in your school board elections in the last 10 years, then you have nobody to complain to about what your child's education is about. They are the ones that can identify what they want to use. Now, I'm in favor of certain, educations over others because of what they put out there. But that is parents choosing that board for that. So quality education. I know we've talked a little bit about previously before this podcast, but I did mention that, like, I'm not a big person on standardized testing, but standardized testing has its merits. We've talked about, for merit, like, how are they learning? How are they doing these things? But I think we need to identify opportunities for kids that doesn't rely upon standardized testing, because there are those that can't.
Yeah, I guess the only problem with that is how you're going to evaluate this.
That's a great question.
My kid has dyslexia, and I have another kid I have 3 of my 4 kids have like a 504 descriptor, which means
the assistants,
they're like special ed kids. And so what that means is, like, each one of them needs extra help, but I only found that out through standardized testing.
I was just going to see, like, what are your thoughts on, in terms of, like, again, another intersection of faith and policy and stuff? Should public schools teach about God? Should we, if you look back at, like, the first history books that were used in America, it's very clearly, like, Christian God is at, the center of the history of the nation and the moral foundation again. Things like having 10 commandments in classrooms, teaching about God, or Bible stories, Christian values. Like, how does that play into your view of education?
I think, moral stories that are coming from the Bible, they are beneficial. I think kids at a young age do need to learn that. Now, if we're going to use them in schools, we are again going to come up, I think, at that particular Supreme Court case is, was that Engel versus Vitale? Also, again, another
60s, right?
Yeah, another issue where that one was providing time for kids to do public prayer,
right,
and a particular prayer. So that one put up the wall for there.
Yeah.
Putting up something like the 10 Commandments definitely needs to be done in classrooms, for, like, history classrooms. Like, that is history and something that we should all learn about. But at the same time, like, there are other parts of history that need to be taught as well. So even prior to, if we're going to talk about Old Testament, there are other civilizations that were around,
Eastern cultures that were
that were also around, that also need to have that discussion. Where that needs to be broken down, that the family does need to provide a little bit more conversation to their kids about, like, hey, I know you're understanding and learning about this, but if we are going to have this conversation about morals, we have that based on the Bible.
So the Texas Education Agency just put out Bluebonnet curriculum, which is exactly that. It's wild. It's amazing. It has pretty much the entire gamut of religion, but it's like, where do you get all of your semantics from, idioms from? Here's, like, the golden rule. Here's where you get this from. Here's the story of the golden rule. Here's what the painting of the Last Supper. Here's what the Last Supper. Then it also goes into Buddha and all the other. It does give a full disclosure on that, and I think it's really exciting to see the state put out something that does give a fuller picture of a historical worldview that includes scripture. And that's what's really great is I think our country is founded upon biblical principles. And so I think one of the things that we need to teach historically, like you said, is like, what were those principles that our country was founded on? And let's not get away from that. So anyway, that's my only thought on that. Holland, would you want to add to that?
I was just curious, what you're like, Supreme Court can, rulings can be overruled sometimes.
Right, that's right.
So,
They can. You're
what's
right.
best, if it's like, this is what's best for the education of Texas children, then, I'm going to try to take this all the way to the top, and because this is what kids need. Or if it's like, no, I don't think it's important. Just kind of curious where you landed on that.
I definitely think when we talked about this Blue Bonnet, if they are, I haven't looked as much into it, and so homework for me. But if they are providing this full picture, because I think that's important that children get a full picture and are able to make choice, based upon guidance, again, from family. What are what are your parents helping you learn about? I think that's important. So
I think we would both agree, like, the family is primarily responsible, obviously, for the education, discipline, discipleship of the children.
Yep.
But it's kind of like, okay, how does school support that?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, everybody homeschools. You either homeschool during the day or you homeschool at night. And, because everything my kid learns is because I either do their homework for them or I help them, coach them, and plead with them to actually do it. And so everybody's going to homeschool at some point, or if they're working, they're not, and they're going to be left to their own devices with some, a teacher, God bless her or him or whoever is doing it. But that is going to leave them like with such like you said, you had two parents at home.
Yeah.
A huge advantage. And so that wild advantage is got to be like, that's why you need community. And because I think a lot of kids are struggling to make it through the school system because they don't have the support to pull it off, and they need community. But that's just my...
I mean, how do you expect a kid to come home,
right,
maybe help out with like the younger siblings, make dinner because parents are still working, maybe they're working 2 jobs? That is an immensely difficult thing for that kid. Or even, again, those younger kids that maybe they're taking care of, like...
super hard.
This teenager is still learning themselves.
Yep.
And now they're responsible, and that's a tough situation. And that's where you get into the conversation about like, well, we're going to go back to that commission on marriage and family, and how can we try and better our
I'm excited to see what that report
see what that
says.
comes. But then also we have that conversation of, if families are having to work multiple jobs, we need to have a conversation about like, what is cost of living in certain areas, because if they can't afford, even with, multiple jobs, what are we going to do about that? Is that the responsibility of the state? And I think that's what's hard, right? You got to go at some point. It's okay if either we eliminate property tax, which would be awesome, or that person's going to move. And although migration isn't like the biggest win, it is an option. And I think sometimes we kind of go, oh, we can't have anyone displaced or moved because that would be some sort of negative thing. I don't know. That's the part where I'm like, that's just part of life. Like, you guys moved a gazillion times, and I moved a bunch as well. And I think sometimes we kind of make that as like the ultimate negative thing, which it might be a great thing. Why not live in a place where you're not stressed with the financial burden of the property tax that you're around it? But get rid of property tax. There we go. Well, then again, you're getting rid of a lot of like income for the state that especially goes to schools. But to kind of flip this, have you ever seen these news clips from wherever that's like, go to Italy because of a dying town and buy this house for like €1, but you got to renovate it and live there? I don't know about y'all, but I certainly love driving through some of these smaller towns in Texas and being like, man, what would it take for us to live here?
Yeah, absolutely.
But that question is like,
farmer.
Be a farmer.
Be a farmer. What is the job there? And that's the thing, is some of these small towns in Texas are struggling because people are leaving them. They don't want to be farmers anymore, and they're moving to cities where they're looking for employment. Like Austin, we had that surge of people, especially with COVID,
the tech
and with tech, that are coming here, and they're driving up housing prices. So the people who originally were here, that's tough. Property tax is a tough thing to overcome. You can really talk about, you have a case for trying to
it's
a case,
or like, just like, even if they just left it like whatever you bought it at, that's where it's stuck at for the rest of your life.
Okay, you really get into what California does here. Yeah. California has a limitation on property tax increases. Like it's real hard. A friend who is moving to California, her father bought it in the 1960s,
right,
and he's had minimal increases on his property. It's like 1% each year.
And then when it gets transferred,
As long as it's inherited,
Okay.
she can inherit it at the same property tax rate.
Wow.
So, but
There you go.
that's California.
Sign me
That's
up. Sign me
California.
up for that
That
one.
means you have to move out there. But I also think about I think about these small towns in Texas. Like, okay, well, if we can find ways that like employment can come to these, we can have more affordable housing. Everybody wants to live in the big cities, and I understand that. And I'm very fortunate that my wife and I, we had great jobs that we could afford to live here.
Yep.
But that is a conversation that does need to be had. What is the responsibility of the government? Is it to assist? Is it to limit what is paid? Is it to say, hey, maybe we need to talk to some of these small chamber of commerce in small towns, be like, hey, what opportunities do you have for people to move here? Is it, is it employment problems, or do people not want to move there because maybe there's no community that they're associated with? How can we
plant a church?
Yeah, plant a church. That could be one.
Get Walmart to come in, like all that. I agree. Like all the different, all the amenities, I guess. I don't know, amenities is the right word.
Kind of, yeah.
Getting people in there. And that's where, as a politician, is that your role to talk to the private sector and say, hey guys, can you guys?
It's not my role.
Okay. like who does that? I mean, someone's got to think of like.
That would be more of me like encouraging, again, a small city council.
Yeah.
Or a chamber of commerce to be like,
Guys.
and again, that would also be a representative who is a representative of certain areas. Like, how can we increase our population in our neck of the woods? I'm not telling anybody not move to Austin, but if you're coming here, please understand that it is a pretty expensive place to live.
Right.
The people that I would be representing if elected, like that is a conversation we're going to have. Like, Austin is not a cheap place.
Right.
Okay. Now, if you're looking to come to Texas, there are areas that are more affordable, but they don't have everything that Austin has or everything that Dallas has or whatever the cities have. So that's, it's what are your trade-offs there? And again, if we can have communities set up that are willing to say, hey, we need more people in this small town because we're a dying town. And again, maybe you buy a property for $10 and you have to renovate it and live there for 10 years. Hey, and then, that could be a way to try and help get those communities growing.
That's good, man.
So actually I had a conversation with my wife. I said, with immigration that we have here in Texas, and we're seeing, and we drive, I love driving through the hill country and seeing some of these small towns that are just look like, I see abandoned houses. I see houses that haven't been, what is that town doing to try and bring people back to them? Maybe is there a language barrier? Are immigrants coming to big cities because they know that there is a language that they can speak? So could a chamber of commerce or could a church say, come here, we have classes for on learning English, and we're going to bring you in and say, we want you to be part of our community, and let's help you. And if one of the biggest barriers that you have right now is a language barrier, how can we work on that?
That's good. Yeah.
So that was like a conversation that I was having because we were driving up past Waco to Lake Whitney. And there was a small town. I was like, oh, this is a cute town. It has a little store. Oh, this is so great. But I'm like, I see an empty house here. I see an empty house there. I see an empty house here. It's like, I wonder what small towns are doing to try and bring people back in. And I don't know.
I think Tulsa at one point was paying people $10,000 a pop to have people move there.
There were some places like Arkansas was really trying to increase people to come to their state.
Who did that. Yeah.
You did? How did it turn out?
They love it. They're still there. Found a church. Yeah.
It's crazy. Right. Hey, what other things did you want to? We have only a couple more minutes. What else you got?
Is there anything, you talked about some things that you really were like, probably last question for me is, you really loved about, hey, here's what James did that I really want to keep going. Is there anything that you were like, I would do this differently? Right
now, I don't have it. I'm not saying that it doesn't exist.
Okay.
But right now, what I have been looking are the things that I'm like, oh, I like this. And if it didn't pass, like, oh, I like this. How can we champion that? Right now, that's been my sidestep research. So give me a little time and I will come back with like, hey, James, if he had this proposal, I'm like, I'm not sure I'm 100% agree with this. I haven't really delved into those right now at the moment. But
okay, that's fair.
Well, I appreciate you, man. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, I didn't get to say my last thing.
Oh, say your last thing.
On education, it was 3 things. It was like the security. We got into a sidebar. Don't worry. The security. So like, a safe environment, the quality education. And I'm going to be honest with y'all. I know it's going to cost money, but I think we need to feed our students. I don't know what y'all think about kids who are hungry.
Oh yeah.
They can be mean. They can be rowdy.
Absolutely.
They can be destructive.
And what happens during the summer?
So during my summer program with GeoForce, we fed the kids. They had breakfast, lunch, dinner, and I had a suitcase that was always filled with like granola bars. I carried apples and oranges. We had snacks. When I had kids say, "This is the first time I've had 3 meals in like one day," that kind of breaks your heart. That hits you right in your feels, and you're like, "What do you mean?" Especially as somebody who never really experienced that.
Yeah. I mean that.
And so, how do I expect a kid how do I have an expectation of a young, either a young adult when they're in high school, elementary aged student, a kid? How am I expecting them to, one, be attentive, not lash out if they are hungry?
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, again, we've talked about economic issues in the home. Sometimes food is not available for them.
Yeah.
And if they're coming to school hungry, that is starting off on a...
This is where I'm like, man, use the church. Like say church, go and be a part of feeding kids and making sure they have lunches, making sure they have, especially during the summer stuff, man, that would be huge. But yeah, I appreciate that. That's
my third.
No, I like it. I like it. Man, thanks for being here, John Holland. Thank you as always. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you have any questions, we can always bring John back. He lives just down the road. Text in at 737-231-0605. We would love to hear from you. Hey, thanks so much for watching. And from our house to yours, have an awesome week of worship.